3 years ago, I met a girl who completely challenged my idea of what fear is at all. At the time, I was about 19. I had travelled quite extensively doing a year long university exchange. I was about halfway through it at this point, and I was really in the process of sort of reinventing who I felt like I was. At the time, I think my confidence was at a sky high just because I had already challenged myself in so many different ways and discovered so many new things about myself, especially physically. I was in the best shape of my life, and mentally, I was doing things that I had never really done before. But again, my confidence was at a completely new level, although I didn't have a real good perspective to frame it against. So when I met this girl, I met her in Madrid in a hostel, and she was on her way back from Morocco, having cycled there from her doorstep in Germany, and she was on the way back from that. Now, to me, that just sounded completely insane. And she relayed these stories of how she had to pretend that she was pregnant in Morocco so people would stop trying to marry her just straight up off the street, which was, to me, just completely foreign concept. And again, as a male who was traveling solo very happily at the time, I couldn't really imagine putting myself in her shoes and doing the same things that I had done to that point. But she had gone a step further and was cycling all the way from Germany to Morocco and back. And I was just like, that's ridiculous. And then she relayed another story about how she had travelled to Israel and hitchhiked from one part of the country to the other. Israel and hitchhiking? Are you joking? And in my head, I was just like, this is some of the wildest shit I've ever heard. You must be crazy. That was my, like, I said that to her face. I'm like, you just, what goes through your head? How do you come up with that? She's like, what's crazy? What does that mean? And I'm like, it means you're brave, I guess. But yeah, I just didn't really know how to respond to this sort of idea, this level of confidence. I thought I was confident, but I wouldn't be that confident. I don't think I personally was in a position to be able to go to Israel and hitchhike from one part of the country to the other. And then she did it as a woman as well, which has its own challenges when you travel to that part of the world, for sure. So I guess what that taught me, and she called me out on it as well, which I think I really appreciate looking back on it, is just calling out what is these words that you use, they're limiting beliefs, in the sense that you call me crazy or, bravery. There's no difference between the two of those words. At the end of the day, she survived, she lived those experiences, and that's what she's going to take with her into the future. And I just sat there kind of stunned. I was like, this is so true, but I never saw it that way. And I think through that conversation, it's really sort of led me to grow from that. And now I feel like I'm on a path as well where I've done things since then that have definitely exceeded my expectations. Following that year, I finished my studies in Ireland, I believe, at the time, and then COVID happened, and I completed my university studies, and then my first job out of university, which is still insane to be saying this, but I started teaching English in a prison, which is just completely nutty, I think, to most people. I don't think people even realize that sort of job exists, but that's what I decided to do because it sounded like something that would really challenge my sort of, I guess, everything. Not just like from a fear perspective, but also just like you don't know what you're going into when you enter that sort of environment. And I think from that perspective, I just really appreciate sort of the conversation that sort of led up to that. So I guess what I want to go on from this is sort of teach you how you can apply this to your own life. I wouldn't encourage people to do the same stuff that she did, but I mean, you can if you're at a level that you feel that you're that confident in yourself and you're that comfortable with who you are. Then do it. Like, what the fuck is stopping you? You know what I mean? So yeah, I think a big part of putting yourself in those challenging situations is not only do you learn so much about yourself, but you just acquire so many skills in those situations as well. Sometimes you don't realize it, so it's really important, I guess, to reflect on those things after, whether that's just writing about it or possibly talking to other people about it as well. It's just a really real way of helping you realize those skills. I think another part of it is just that we tend to catastrophize our fears and think like, oh, what's the worst possible outcome that could happen, without even putting yourself in a position to try to succeed or fail. Not that failure is necessarily bad. I mean, the worst thing realistically that can happen to you in any situation is that you die. Outside of that, it's not really like at a level where you should really consider that your whole life will be over if you make a mistake. Yeah, I think one thing about my trip in particular that I realized, and potentially this is just completely luck and also my perception of my experiences, but it seemed like every time something went wrong, it also went right very soon after. I guess in the sense balancing itself out. At a certain point in Spain, I really did have a major injury to my back, but in the end, it sort of allowed me to sort of move on from what I was doing at the time, which is this major hiking trip across the top of northern Spain, and led me to go experience a new place, which at that point was Italy, somewhere I'd always wanted to go. So I guess it's sort of that glass half full mentality. There are so many other examples of it on the trip though, but I feel like by framing it in that way, it always made me feel better even when things went wrong, because I knew something else was pretty cool, was probably on the horizon for me. If you can adapt that sort of idea to your own life, it will serve you so fucking well, because every time something goes wrong, I guess you just don't take it personally, because there's going to be at least one other good thing that happens to you. And I feel like these things always tend to balance themselves out. So that's, I think that's a really big thing for people to learn. I think as well, if you're in a position where you're so scared of something that you can't face it, I think a possibly really useful way of doing things is just to sort of reverse engineer why you're scared of something. So I mean, if you're scared of physical danger, I suppose, is one major fear that people have, then you can sort of step back and it's like, well, you can get fitter, you can learn to fight or self-defense or whatever. There are ways or things that you can do to put in place, that will eliminate that fear in the future. In the same sense for social anxiety, which is a little bit different for sure, but if you struggle to communicate with others, I think a really good way of just preparing yourself for that is also just to read and write, to teach yourself how to communicate with yourself. And once you're at a level where you can communicate with yourself at a higher level, then you can go out and communicate with others at a high level and, have that confidence in yourself that you're able to share your ideas in a way that's actually interesting to other people. I am a big proponent of writing. I love to write, and I'd love to teach other people to write, hence why I kind of do that in my job. But, I think that's a massive thing for people to do, and I would really encourage other people to do those sorts of things. I think traveling is also a really solid way to put yourself in a position to challenge your fears in a very safe environment. I think at the time before I started to travel, I wasn't really happy with who I was or sort of the point in my life that I was at, but I knew by putting myself overseas in an environment where no one knew me, I could sort of reinvent myself. And I think I found that very, very useful, because I could come into it as a completely different person and no one would really have those sorts of, I guess preconceived ideas of who I was based on, who they knew me to be when I was growing up through high school or whatever. And I think by putting yourself in that environment, you can really just try new things and see how they work. I think that served me very well, especially when I studied in America, just to put myself out there and really be confident in my ability to meet new people and just to live life in a different way than what I had lived it before. And my time there was completely insane because I said yes to everything that was going on. I just gave everything a fucking chance, and yeah, I got a lot out of that. So, I mean, I'd hope you were able to sort of have the same ideas and same opportunities and experiences as I got to experience before I went to university. And you can do that when you go to a different university as well. You're not limited by anything at that point. You know, you achieve that sort of freedom once you leave high school. So, yeah, just go for it. What do you have to lose?